Sweating like a dog. It's hot out, and you and your dog are taking a midday run. As your shirt becomes soaked with perspiration, Rover breaks a sweat in his own way by panting. That's what you've always thought, anyway. Dogs don't sweat by panting, but they do regulate their body temperature that way. They release excess heat through their tongues while taking short, rapid breaths, sometimes as many as 3 to 400 per minute. This process expels hot air from their lungs and body cavities, but because such breathing is quick and shallow, it doesn't use up much energy, so the dog doesn't risk overheating more. It's widely thought that dogs don't sweat at all, but that's not true either. A dog's fur prevents the release of moisture and heat. Our canine companions like the extensive sweat glands that we have, but they do have some, and they're located in their foot pads. That's why you can see pad prints on wood floors and outdoor decks in warm weather. That's also why your pet's paws can smell kind of funky like armpits. Dogs perspire when they get overheated or anxious, just like humans do. We get sweaty pits, they get sweaty paws. However, the paws of a dog are too small to release the excessive body heat that's generated during a vigorous romp in the heat of summer. That's when the tongue flops out. With both cooling systems in operation, a dog is so efficient at lowering its body temperature that it can endure prolonged high-speed chases in pursuit of a rabbit, say, without the need to stop. On the other hand, a rabbit has no such means to cool down. Sure, it'll keep running to evade the dog, but it'll likely drop dead from heat exhaustion in the process. The purpose of purring. Felines are forever mysterious to mere humans. One of our favorite kitty quirks is the act of purring. Don't cats purr because they're content. When cats purr, people are happy, but cats aren't always happy when they purr. There are actually several reasons why cats purr, and happiness is only one of them. Purring begins at birth, and it is a vital form of communication between mother and kitten. The kitten purrs to let its mother know it's getting enough milk, and the mother cat purrs back to reassure her kitten. What's the significance of purring? Cats purr throughout their lives, and often at times when you wouldn't expect. Cats purr when they are frightened, ill, or injured. They even purr while giving birth. Animal behaviorists believe that cats purr to comfort themselves during stressful situations and to signal their feelings to other cats. A frightened cat may purr to indicate that it is being submissive or non-threatening, and an aggressive cat may purr to let other cats know that it will not attack. Some cats purr even when they're dying. Domestic cats aren't the only felines that purr. Some of the big cats, lions, cougars, and cheetahs also exhibit this endearing behavior, but it's much more soothing, not to mention safer, to stroke a purring pet cat than the king of the jungle. Freaky facts: animal mating. The funnel web spider knocks his mate unconscious with pheromones before mating. The male Agirides, love that word, Zanatus spider secretes a drug that intoxicates the female, which is good because otherwise she wouldn't devour him. Harlequin or Harlequin, bass, and hamlet fish, we're talking fish here, bass and hamlet fish take turns being male and female, including releasing sperm and eggs during the mating process. Albatross can spend weeks courting, and their relationships can last for decades. However, the actual act of mating lasts less than a minute. Fruit flies perform an elaborate 7-step dance before mating. If any part of it is not completed perfectly, there will be no copulation. Mayflies live for only 1 day, during which they do nothing but mate. The rattlesnake has 2 penises. The penis of the echidnas has 4 heads, and a pig's is shaped like a corkscrew. The male swamp Antechinus, a mouse-like marsupial in Australia, has sex until he dies, often from starvation. Often he's eaten because he's simply too weak after mating to escape predators. The idea that opossums mate through the female's nostrils is a myth. Although the male opossum has a forked penis, he mates with the female in the normal manner. Conveniently, she has 2 uteri, so he deposits sperm into both of them at once. Rattlesnakes can mate for 23 hours, and soapberry bugs can go for 11 days, but that's nothing compared to stick insects. They can go on for 2 months. No cats were harmed. What's the story with so-called cat gut, the material used in tennis and musical instrument strings? It is really made of guts, but the guts don't come from cats. Intestinal fortitude. The intestines of cattle and other livestock are cleaned, stripped of fat, and prepared with chemicals before they can be made into catgut string. Historically, preparation of string from animal tissue dates back thousands of years in recorded history and likely much longer ago in reality. Intestines are uniquely suited because of their combination of strength and elasticity, even in comparison to other pretty robust, naturally occurring strings like horsehair or silk. This makes sense intuitively because of the role our intestines play in our bodies, but let's not think too hard about that. One downside is that the prepared gut fibers are still very absorbent, enough so that even atmospheric humidity can warp them out of shape. In stitches. Historical humans realized surprisingly early that gut string was a good way to sew wounds, and in this case, the absorbency is a bonus. These humans weren't aware of issues like infection, so their ingenuity with gut string was a matter of simple craftsmanship. You should sew with the strongest material you can find, whether for clothing or shelter or for a wound. Thousands of years later, scientists experimented and realized that gut string could dissolve in the human body. With the eventual rise of germ theory, doctors were able to create and use sterilized dissolving sutures that would be recognizable to the ancient Egyptians who first documented their sewing of wounds. In fact, most dissolvable stitches are still made with prepared animal fibers or with synthetics that were designed to mimic animal fibers in the body. High strung. For musical instruments, gut strings also date back thousands of years. In both Latin and Greek, the terms for strings and bowstrings, and our modern words chord and chord, spelled C-H-O-R-D, and the other one C-O-R-D, FYI, were from the original Greek term meaning guts. Musicians found that gut strings made the best sound, but the strings warped, frayed, and broke quite quickly because of the effects of moisture in the air and from musicians' touch. Modern musicians can use strings with a core of gut that's surrounded by a snug winding of very fine metal. In a fine example of art imitating nature, their structure mimics the way our flexible gut fibers are arranged in our intestines, with both lengthwise fibers and circular bands. The gut racket. Gut strings are still considered the gold standard by many high-level tennis players and manufacturers. In tennis, the absorbency of gut strings is counteracted with topical wax that seals the strings. Choosing and making gut strings for tennis rackets is still an artisan craft, and some cattle, most if not all tennis gut strings come from cattle, apparently produce finer quality gut strings than others, creating a Wagyu beef-like hierarchy among cattle ranchers. Digesting the information. Humans have shown remarkable ingenuity since we first diverged from our most recent ancestor, but even by human standards, it's unusual to have a found material that works as both a durable tool and a nourishing food, depending on how you prepare it. Whether you're preparing for your Wimbledon debut or a period-correct Baroque chamber orchestra, consider the millennia-old tradition of the gut string. The Great Sickness. When Western explorers, traders, and settlers made their way into the Alaskan frontier in the 18th and 19th centuries, they brought with them diseases to which the natives had never before been exposed. Maladies such as measles, tuberculosis, and influenza wiped out entire communities whose members had no natural immunity to such illnesses. So many natives died that it forever destabilized the traditional Alaskan culture, but not all of these stories had tragic endings. North to Alaska. Practically no one had heard of Nome, Alaska before January 1925, just 2 degrees south of the Arctic Circle on the Bering Sea. It was a small village that was isolated during the summer and inaccessible during the long Arctic winters. Nome had 1 doctor, 4 nurses, a 24-bed hospital, and 8,000 units of expired diphtheria serum when it radioed for help on January 22, 1925. Dr. Curtis Welch desperately pleaded for 1.1 million units of serum to combat a diphtheria epidemic that threatened 10,000 lives. Without the serum, the mortality rate would be close to 100%. The nation quickly responded to Nome's call for help. The needed serum was gathered and sent northward from Seattle by steamship. Meanwhile, 300,000 units, enough to treat 30 people, were found in Anchorage. Though not enough to control the epidemic, it was enough to contain it until the rest arrived. But how to get the 20-pound package of serum from Anchorage to Nome? An airlift was considered, but was quickly discounted. The local planes were too unreliable, and the weather was too poor for flying. The Bering Sea was already frozen over for the winter, making a delivery by water impossible. The only way to reach Nome, it was decided, was by dog sled. In the years before the bush plane, the dog sled was the only reliable way to get around the interior of Alaska. Sled teams and their mushers traveled down the Iditarod Trail, among others, delivering mail and supplies and bringing out gold. This time they were asked to deliver a more precious cargo, the Great Race of Mercy. The package of serum was rushed by train from Anchorage to the town of Nanana on January 27, 1925. Will Bill Shannon and his team of 9 dogs were the first of 20 mushers and approximately 150 dogs to relay the serum 675 miles to Nome. 674 miles to Nome. Known as the Great Race of Mercy, the mushers follow the Tanana River for 137 miles to the village of Tanana, where the Tanana and Yukon rivers meet. There, the route followed the Yukon for 230 miles to the village of Kaltag. From Kaltag, it was a 90-mile run to Unalakleet. Then came the most dangerous leg of the relay, 208 miles over the Seward Peninsula, which was completely exposed to the worst Arctic winter in 20 years, including minus 50-degree temperatures and gale force winds. Once across the peninsula, the last 42 miles to Nome were across the treacherous frozen ice of the Bering Sea. At 3 o'clock a.m. on February 2nd, Gunnar Kaasen and his team of dogs, led by the now famous Balto, made it to Nome with the serum. Eventually, another run was made to deliver the rest of the medicine. Officially, the epidemic claimed 7 lives, but there were probably upwards of 100 fatalities among the natives outside Nome, who buried their children without reporting their deaths. The mushers and their dogs became instant celebrities, receiving letters of commendation from President Calvin Coolidge, gold medals, and a princely sum of $25 for their trouble. Many participants traveled the country recounting their trip to Nome, including Kaas and Balto, who toured the West Coast in 1925 and 1926. In 1925, a statue of Balto was placed in New York Central Park. When he died in 1933, he was stuffed and put on display at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. All right, freaky facts, opossums. The rat-tailed opossum is the only marsupial that is native to North America. A female opossum can bear as many as 20 babies in one litter, but because she only has about a dozen teats, every birthing is followed by an epic race through her fur to reach the safety of her pouch and find a nipple. Because each baby clamps onto the same nipple every time it feeds, those that arrive too late will perish. A mother opossum gestates her young for only 13 days before they are born. Baby opossums, which are about the size of honeybees at birth, are so undeveloped that they can't even suck milk. The mother has to use her own muscles to pump the milk into their tiny gullets. After baby opossums leave the pouch at between 2 and 3 months, the mother carries all of them on her back for a month or so whenever she and her brood leave their den. Opossums do not normally hang from trees by their tails. Opossums have opposable thumb-like digits on all 4 paws and a tail that can grasp food and tree branches. Despite their reputation for eating anything, even rotting flesh, opossums are fastidious about hygiene. They bathe themselves frequently, including several times during meals. The opossum is the oldest surviving mammal family on Earth, dating back to the dinosaurs and the Cretaceous period some 70 million years ago. Immortality in the ocean. By repeating its life cycle, this creature reverses the aging process. A handy talent. In the 1990s, scientists noticed something peculiar about Turritopsis nutricula. Love those words. A hydrosome related to the jellyfish. It seemed to be able to live forever. That tiny creature, which can be found bobbing around the blue Caribbean waters, is capable of returning to its juvenile polyp stage even after reaching sexual maturity and mating. The hydrozoan evolved this ability through a cell development process called transdifferentiation. Certain other animals can do this in order to regenerate an appendage, say an arm or a leg, but this is the only creature that can regenerate its whole body. First, it turns into a blob-like shape, which then develops into a polyp colony. Discover magazine described this process as being similar to a butterfly turning back into a caterpillar. Actually, the creatures seem to only revert to this early stage when in trouble, e.g. they are starving or in danger of getting eaten by other sea creatures. Crazily enough, they can repeat this process over and over again whenever necessary. Thanks to this evolutionary quirk, they do not have to die despite the ongoing threat of hunger and bullies. Panama or bust. Recently, scientists have noticed that although the creatures originate in the Caribbean, some of them have been turning up in waters near Spain, Italy, and Japan. According to the Discover, researchers believe the creatures are crisscrossing the oceans by hitchhiking in the ballast tanks of large ships. One thing's for sure, with its ability to turn back the clock, the Turritopsis is bound to become the envy of everyone in Hollywood. Fur-loving Führer. Did the Third Reich treat subhumanly? Even as Nazi Germany exterminated millions of people, it fiercely protected its animal population. The story of the Holocaust is a heart-wrenching tale. Nazis, operating under the decidedly mad precepts of Adolf Hitler, and the Third Reich systematically and diabolically destroyed those it deemed subhuman. By their twisted definitions, this number included people of non-Aryan bloodlines such as Jews, Gypsies, and other racially inferior groups, overlooking the subhuman stipulation entirely. However, this did not include members of the animal kingdom. Here is the story of an uneven regime that found beauty and worth in its animals, plural, while it delivered death and destruction to humankind. Animal's best friend. Not many would disagree that Adolf Hitler was the devil incarnate, yet in the area of animal rights he was anything but. This bizarre dichotomy also applied to Hitler's principal henchmen Hermann Goering and Heinrich Himmler. All felt that defenseless animals deserved better treatment than they were receiving and took proactive steps to ensure it. As early as 1927, members of the Nazi Party called for action against animal cruelty, and in particular, they zeroed in on the kosher butchering that was being practiced throughout the nation. Later, in order to justify his persecution of Jews, Hitler promoted graphic films that showed them slaughtering lambs. In early 1933, just after the Nazi organization had risen to power, its parliament passed laws regulating the slaughter of animals. Most notably, Goering enacted a ban against the act of vivisection. Let's go back. Goering, Goering. Goering. The dissection of animals for scientific study, an absolute and permanent ban on vivisection. Vivisection is not only a necessary law to protect animals and to show sympathy with their pain, but it is also a law for humanity itself, said Hitler's right-hand man. I have therefore announced the immediate prohibition of vivisection, 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 and have made the practice a punishable offense in Prussia, the core of the German Empire. Until such time as punishment is pronounced, the culprit shall be lodged in a concentration camp. Goering would go on to ban commercial animal trapping and he placed strong restrictions on hunting. He even went so far as to regulate the boiling of crabs and lobsters, allegedly because he felt distressed by their screams during the cooking process. Man's worst enemy. It helps to understand the era's political overtones. Even as the Nazis were passing groundbreaking legislation on behalf of animals, they were drawing up decrees that would define lesser beings, targeted them for eventual extermination. In their demented view, these subhumans included humans descended from non-Aryan parents or grandparents. Even those with one grandparent from the wrong bloodline were placed in jeopardy. At the same time that the Nazis passed their pro-animal laws, they opened the Dachau, Buchenwald, Ravensbrück, and Sachsenhausen concentration camps. Although Hitler's regime would eventually exterminate an estimated 6 million Jews and untold numbers of other human beings, it would continue its efforts on behalf of animals. Meanwhile, the systematic killing of humans continued. It's beyond ironic that this sort of animal rights model should come from such a diabolical source, but that's how history played out. The Nazis viewed the issue in simplistic terms and acted accordingly. In their distorted view, Aryans ruled the hierarchy, animals were second, and subhumans, or Untermensch, dwelled at the bottom. It was the gross misfortune of more than 6 million living souls that their assigned classification wasn't at least on a par with that of a dog.